Good morning, Wabash. Speaking today at Pioneer Chapel will be Grant Freeman with his talk titled Patrimony, Standing on the Shoulders of Giants. Grant was raised in the rough and tumble mining town of Butte, Montana. He spent his springs and summers chasing trout with a fly rod, upland birds in the fall, and big game through the winter mountains. He dreamt of little else. In a spirit of adventure, Grant headed east for his secondary education. Gregory the Great Academy is a small liberal arts all-male Catholic boarding school. That experience planted a seed that has borne fruit throughout his life. There, among the boys, the game of rugby and books, poetry, and music were added to the menu of delightful pursuits. His Catholic faith became an earnest pursuit in high school, and he strives to continue to be a good Catholic today to raise his children in the faith. He earned his undergraduate degree in history from Christendom College and was the captain of the soccer team his senior year. He earned his master's degree in clinical mental health counseling from Divine Mercy University. Inspired by and grateful for the examples of his parents, wife, teachers, and mentors, he hopes to hand on the gifts that he has received. Let's give a warm welcome to Grant.
Good morning, Wabash. Good morning. Thank you very much for the introduction, Luca. Appreciate it. So I'd like you to take a moment to just think about where you stand. Think about the shoulders that you stand upon. Maybe think about who's impacted your life to contribute to your journey to this particular place. Right here, today. Try to make a quick list of all those that have influenced you and have brought you to this place, this opportunity. Take a moment right now. Think about how you got here. Think about the names of the people that had to be in place for you to get here. Your heads are nodding, thinking it through. Have you gotten to the end of the list yet? It's not a short list. The names on that list go back so far. You may need to take some more time after this short talk to even scratch the surface. Don't forget to keep adding names as you go on through life. Because wherever you are, you've gotten there with the aid of someone else. Maybe you started with your own name. Fair enough. Maybe you started with your mother who brought you into the world. You're a good boy. Maybe you started with that teacher or mentor who suggested that you should look into Wabash. That seems like a likely starting place. Perhaps you're thinking, good God, why am I here? Maybe for some of you that are going through a rough beginning of the semester, maybe you're questioning how good of an advice that was to come here. That counts too. Just start somewhere. But I warn you, it could change your life. Once you do that, you're going to have to find out that there were actually some negative influences in there too. Perhaps it wasn't all sunshine and roses. Perhaps you had to overcome some difficult hurdles. Perhaps your story is more bumpy than smooth. Once you do that, you're going to have a clearer idea of your heritage. Some might call it your culture, or the things that have been handed on to you. Perhaps tradition might be a word to use. It's a mixed bag, and it's a long story. Gods and demons, men and women, good times and bad. And here you are, standing on their shoulders. But that's not patrimony. Patrimony is part of that, but only a part. There's also matrimony, but we're not going to talk about that today. What everyone gets together is heritage, tradition, culture that is handed on by men and women together. But what you all get to give is that inheritance that's passed down by men to all those who come after them. You get a special word, patrimony. I did this before. I did this exercise of going through the list, finding out what had been given to me, and then had to wrestle with my responsibility of what to do about it. Here's a few thoughts on it. You cannot give what you do not have. So if there's something that you see that you'd like to hand on, you have to go and get it. Where do you get it? You're going to have to find somebody that has it. You're going to have to convince them to give up their treasure. You're going to have to ask them to share. What you have already been given can be squandered, forgotten. That's probably the worst. Actively despoiled by an enemy. That's traumatic. It can also be preserved. That's pretty good. But better than that, it can be improved. Well, how do you preserve it? How do you improve it? You might have to ask someone that's done it or is in the process of doing it and is a little further along than you for some help. What you pass on is what you value. Make sure that you're discerning. Make sure that when you're handed something, that it's something that's worth handing on to the next person, because it could be that someone gave you a snake or a scorpion, or it could be something that is life-alteringly good. And you're going to have to be the one to figure out whether you're going to let it go on to the next one, your children perhaps, those that you care for, your company, your patients, wherever you go. You're going to have to think about that. Here's a little diamond in the rough. One person can have a huge impact. Perhaps that will be one of you. Perhaps it will be all of you. Hopefully, it's not none of you. When I did this, I was a recent college graduate who I had a history degree, but I didn't have a history shop I was about to open. So I had to go and get a job selling shoes. Well, I wasn't selling them, I was kind of managing the office. I did that for about a year, and I went back to my high school. I went to an all-guys Catholic boarding school, not like Hogwarts at all. It was more the poetry and the music and the heraldry. I had to recite poetry all the time. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky, and all the rest. When I arrived as a freshman, I did it as a matter of course because everyone else was doing it, and I wanted to fit in, because if you didn't fit in, well, you got some attention. So I did my best to keep up with everything, and by the time I graduated, I thought I'd become a full-fledged member of the school alumni group. I bled that place, just bled it. Then I went on to college, got this job, and I returned for my brother's graduation. We went to the ceremony. There were speeches that were given, the tales of rugby won and lost, the beauty of friendship, the adventures cross countries. There wasn't a dry eye in the joint. Then the headmaster stood up and he gave kind of a sobering talk, and he said a whole bunch of stuff, but one line that I remember. He said, "If you don't give what you got here, you didn't get what we gave you." If you don't give what you got here, you didn't get what we gave you. I thought all of it was for me. I enjoyed the music, the song, the friendship, the sport, the education. I enjoyed it all. It's for me. Little did I realize that there was something more to learn. And that thought led me on a journey reflecting back on all the things that I valued. It took me back to Montana. It took me back to my family. It took me back to stories that were told of me as a child on my father's back as he was fly fishing down the river, and I was in the back choking on leaves that I was eating, and my father wasn't really paying attention, but he was introducing me to the wilds of Montana. He took me out and waded through the rivers with me on his back, probably not supported by my mother. Beautiful thing. I fell in love with nature. I was put in the opportunity for it. I formed a relationship with reality. I came to appreciate beauty as it is, not as it's fabricated. It remains to this day one of the great delights of my life. Arguably, there's nothing better than sitting in a tree waiting for the elusive white-tailed deer to come walking by. With just you, a stick, a string, and the life and death of the world. Just right there. The next thing that is important that I reflected on after leaving St. Greg's was that I valued more than anything else from that school the deep and abiding friendships that I took. The friendships did not begin on day one. On the last day of our school, 4 years later, we cried those hot tears that brothers can cry when they see that they will not be together any longer. Perhaps you know what that's like. Perhaps at a place like this, that kind of emotion can actually come into the life of the world. Maybe you'll see it someday. It's harder to value friendship than it is to value the beautiful world. It is beautiful just to look at it. Friendship is beautiful once you cultivate it. I invite you to practice, because hopefully with time and effort, it will become stable. It will become a shelter for you in the storms. Perhaps even you will do this with some beautiful woman, and together you will remain stable for life, till death do you part. The final, most powerful relationship that I received at that school was with the divine. I got inklings of it when I was a child, when I'd go out into the world of Montana and look out and say, "Oh my God, how beautiful." Not as some vulgarity, but as a prayer. And then when I left that school, I might have said, "Good God, I'll miss you," to a friend. Also, as a prayer and an intention. But falling in love with the divine, that planted a seed that would remain needing care every day. To think that perhaps in the beginning, the omnipotent God thought of me and said, "I love him so much, I wish him to be." And so I came to be. Through the gift of my mother and father. It is the hardest thing to value, perhaps because there are so many other distractions that are good and noble that you might forget it. Once you own it, you must cultivate it, or it stagnates. Men long for a battle to fight, a beauty to rescue, and an adventure to live. John Eldredge wrote that line in a book that I highly recommend for you to read, Wild at Heart. I think that the battle here is for you to collect what is worthy and valuable, to protect it, to provide it to others, and also to make sure that others might come to love it as you do. Which means, glory be, you'll have to procreate. This idea of bringing forth life, to care for it, to present before it all that is good and beautiful and true, is going to cost you everything. In fact, people don't die for ideas. They die for home, they die for country, they die for family, and they die for the love of God. And so I invite you, gentlemen, to consider the longer something's been around, perhaps the more valuable it is, and to cast it aside without a second thought because of some newfangled thing, some new idea that has not been tested and tried by men and women for thousands of years. It seems to me to be a dumb idea until you have proven whether or not it is valuable. You all are to test it and try it. Do not take it and own it until it has been proven useful, good, true, and ultimately worthy to be passed on to the next generation. Question for you to take home and discuss is, where have you come from and where are you going? Choose wisely. That's it.
A few final announcements. On Saturday, soccer will be hosting Illinois Wesleyan at Fisher Field. Starting on Sunday, golf will be competing in the DePaul Fall Invitational. And now, will you all please rise and join me in singing Old Wabash? Da 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 da.